This is R2D Tech, and today we've got a very exciting video on the new Samsung Galaxy Tab S7 Plus, so stay tuned. In terms of design language, this tablet follows the same sort of language as the iPad Pros of 2018 and 2020. So you've got that really nice boxy design, which is also still quite thin, and you have 4 speakers, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom, which will give you very nice stereo sound, and this is actually tuned by AKG on the Tab, so it's obviously going to sound very good indeed. Now you also have an aluminium body, which will be quite durable, and obviously a glass display. Speaking of the display though, it has a very nice uniform bezel all the way around, which I think is a lot nicer to look at than different width bezels on the top and sides. Now you also do have a camera bump on the back, which isn't too significant, and of course cameras aren't really the focus of tablets, but we'll get onto that later. In terms of colours though, you can choose between bronze, silver and black, and I think any of these would look quite professional. Maybe if you're in a work environment you would opt for either the silver or black, but if you want something more fun then maybe you'll go for that bronze colour like I might have. Now let's talk about that display, which is probably the thing that you interact with most on a device like this. So you're getting a really nice 12.4 inch Super AMOLED 120Hz display with a resolution of 1752 by 2800 pixels. Now AMOLED is probably one of the key words here because it's actually quite unusual, especially if you look at the Apple tablets, to find an AMOLED display on a tablet, especially of this size. So all the iPads actually have LCD displays or liquid retina displays, which is basically the same thing. And of course AMOLED is a much superior technology, so the blacks will be much truer on this tablet, which is always great to see. Of course 120Hz is also quite a key point to make here, and that will mean that scrolling through the software and playing games and things like that will just seem so smooth on this tablet, and I'm really happy that Samsung could include this. Now in terms of resolution, it has got that really high resolution, which is Ultra HD, but the only slight downgrade is that when you're using the 120Hz feature, you won't be able to use the full resolution. It will actually put you back down to 1080p, which is slightly annoying, but I'm not too bothered, especially since I personally don't think you can see the change in resolution that much, especially on a display of this size. In terms of software, you do get One UI 2.5 as a skin over Android 10, and recently I've become a huge fan of One UI on these tablets, mainly for a feature called DEX. And if you don't know what that is, it basically is like a second operating system on the tablet, which makes it like a full-blown desktop experience. And this is absolutely great for productivity, especially if you don't want to carry a second laptop with you all the time. And one thing which makes this tablet really special is actually the really insane multitasking that you get on it. And it's so much better than what you get on the iPad. So along with the standard like side-by-side views and things like that, which you do get on the iPad, you also have pop-up windows, and this is just great for multitasking. And it's things like this that I think just make this tablet an even better productivity device than the iPads. And that's really hard to say because I do really like the iPad Pros. So that's just something to say about Samsung's tablets at the moment. In the past they haven't been that good, but this one I think is a game changer, and especially with the S-Pen, which we'll get onto later, I personally think that this is now a better tablet for productivity than the iPad Pros. Speaking of the S-Pen, I don't really want to describe it for too long just because I think it's one of those things you've got to try out for yourself, but I will mention some of the really nice upgrades. First of all, the design is so much nicer this year. It looks way less cheap and plasticky, and it looks a lot more like the Apple Pencil, I think, and that's definitely a good thing. So it also has that flat edge as well, so it can magnetically attach onto the back of the tablet, which is really handy. But the main upgrade is the latency. I don't know how they've done it, but they've managed to match the Apple Pencil's 9 millisecond latency, which is absolutely amazing. It will make this so much more functional for things like making notes or drawing on this tablet. Now, of course, Samsung's Pen, S-Pen, has a few things over the Apple Pencil as well. It has those air gestures which you can activate with the click of a button. So you can actually customize these to do whatever you want. For example, if you draw like a certain gesture in the air, you can open up multitasking and things like that, which is really handy for productivity. And again, might just make this tablet even better than the iPad Pros in terms of productivity. Moving on to the specs, you do get the latest and greatest Snapdragon 865 Plus in this device, and I think this is the first device that I know of to be using this new chipset. So obviously the performance is going to be really great, especially with that 120Hz display. Now, where I live, you have to get the 5G option if you want this device. But I think there might be other places, maybe in the US, I'm not sure, where you can opt for the 4G option. And if this is significantly cheaper, I would personally recommend just going for that, especially since 5G isn't really that well set up at the moment in most places. Now, in terms of storage, you can choose between 128 gigs and 256 gigabytes, and I think either of these would be great, especially with the cloud options available nowadays. But you do, of course, also get expandable storage up to 1 terabyte, so I don't really think storage is going to be a huge problem with this device. Now, in terms of RAM, you can choose between the 6GB RAM option, which is the 128GB model, or if you opt for the 256GB model, you do get 8GB of RAM. Now, in the UK where I live, this option isn't available. You have to get the base option, but I think in the US it is available. I think either of these would be good, but if you are really planning on maxing out on the multitasking, then maybe the 8GB RAM option would be better for you. In terms of I/O, as I just mentioned, you do get that expandable storage, but you also have USB-C, which is great to see, and a nano SIM slot, which is great if you want to have that LTE connection. Of course, if you don't want to pay for that contract, you can just get a hotspot from your phone or connect to Wi-Fi, which is probably just as good. Now, you also have that smart connector, which we'll get onto later, but it basically allows you to connect to things like the book cover, which is a really handy thing to get if you want to max out the productivity. There are a couple of extra features with this device though, so you do have that ultrasonic fingerprint reader, which is always good to see for security, but you also can buy the book cover, as I just mentioned, which is basically the equivalent of the Magic Keyboard which Apple sell for their iPads. But I think this one's actually better. So it comes in two parts. One part actually magnetically attaches onto the back of the tablet, and that's the part which has the stand. So you can just use this on its own if you just want like a case and stand for your iPad, for your Galaxy Tab S7 Plus. But then you can also attach the second part, which is the keyboard part, and that again attaches magnetically with those smart connectors. So then you have a really full productivity device, and this actually has a trackpad on it as well, so you can navigate the software. And this is especially useful if you want to use that Samsung DEX feature, which is like the full desktop operating system. And it's great for things like surfing the internet or making documents, PowerPoints, and things like that. Now let's get on to battery, which is always interesting on tablets. You get a 10,090 milliamp hour battery, which is very large, and of course Samsung claim will get you through the full day and more. I'm inclined to believe them just because the battery is so big, but all I will say is that because it is running an AMOLED display, which of course drains the battery more than LCD, and also it has that 120Hz refresh rate, which again does drain the battery quite a lot, you might struggle to get through the full day if you're using it for many hours in the day, especially if you're also using it for productivity with that book cover and all of that. Now, what I will say though is that it does have 45 watt charging, which is fairly fast. I have seen 65 watt charging on other devices, but it's still very fast. The only problem is that they don't provide you with this 45 watt charging brick in the box. You do have to buy that separately, which I find really annoying actually, especially since you're paying quite a lot for the device, which we'll get onto in just a bit. This seems like a very Apple move. I mean, I'm not taking shots at Apple, but it's just something that they would do, to be honest. And I'd expect a bit better from Samsung, but at least they do have the option for that fast charging. When it comes to cameras, I know not many people care about tablet cameras, so I'll be really brief. You do get an ultra wide and wide on the back, which will not be the best quality, mainly because, again, not many people will use them. But more importantly is the selfie camera for things like Zoom conferences or Skype. And you do actually get a 1080p camera, which is pretty decent for things like Skype anyway, and is more than some companies, Apple, can say about their devices. When it comes to price, which will either be the deal maker or breaker, in the UK where I live, you can only currently get the base 6GB of RAM model, but it has to be with 5G, and that comes in around £999, which I think with the tax conversions will end up being around $999 as well. Now, if you consider that lots of flagship phones cost more than this at the moment, I think it's a really good deal, especially with all the productivity options that you have with this. It is important to mention the book cover does not come with this, but I think the S-Pen does, which is a great deal, and more than I can say about some other companies which charge you $120 for the Apple Pencil. What? Of course, if you do want the higher spec models, you'll pay a bit more, but I still think it's worth paying that bit extra for the 8GB of RAM. I also think that it's worth buying the book cover, and at the moment actually if you pre-order, it seems on the website you can get the book cover for free. So if you are going to get one of these now and you do want to use it as like a full laptop, definitely jump onto that deal while it's still around. To wrap things up, I personally think that with the book cover and S-Pen and with that One UI software, this is a better device for productivity than the new iPads. Of course, if you're in the Apple ecosystem already, then you might just get the iPad Pro because it's easier to share files between them with things like AirDrop. But other than that, I think this is just the better device at the moment for productivity. As usual, if you like the video, then please give us a thumbs up. I think it helps with the algorithm somehow. But also, if you want to see more content like this in the future, then you might want to hit the subscribe button and notification bell below. Thanks.